off, thank you, Ron, for inviting me, and thank you to all the participants for giving us your time and joining, as well as all the other presenters. So I'm going to move relatively quickly. Ron and I had talked about this prior. It's kind of two topics that are going to be mini lightning talks, really because these two topics generally can be 30 minutes or more a piece. And with the limited time that we have available, I want to kind of condense them and move very quick. To that point, my contact information is here on the screen. And at the end, I've got a QR code with a V card. So if you want to scan it with your phone, it will also be in the PDF that's distributed. You can always reach out to me and follow up. So with that said, my name is Pat Synor. I'm based out of Detroit, Michigan, been with Google Cloud about 3.5 years now. And prior to joining Google Cloud, I spent about 20 years in IT operations. So did pretty much everything you can imagine from early on in my career, end user support, printers, desktop user support, that sort of thing. And then all the way up to, shutting down data centers, migrating applications into the cloud. With that said, my more recent focus at Google, I primarily cover automotive segment as a technical sales resource, but I am focusing a lot more recently on the security side and hold certifications and handle a lot of our security conversations. And that's what brings me here today. So with today's agenda, we're going to go through the first topic being kind of an overview of Google Cloud security. So how is Google approaching security as a whole? What does that mean for Google Cloud and for our customers? Really, it's going to be a little bit of myth busting because what we find more often than not is our customers tend to be more familiar with our consumer products than our enterprise products. So I like to educate customers on what the differences are and what is really happening despite what they may have heard or read. The second part is more of a public service announcement on a real world use case and real world problem that a majority of organizations have and just don't know it. So we're going to talk about that, what it means to you, what the solutions are. And then again, feel free to reach out to me for assistance afterward. So just to get started, these icons, I'm sure, are very familiar to all of you. These are probably applications that you're using multiple times a day on a daily basis. And actually, this slide probably should be updated because this is now actually 10 products, with the 10th being Google Translate. But these products are all used by over 1 billion users actively every day. In the case of things like Gmail, multiple billions of users. And the reason that I like to show this is not really to boast and say, look at all the users we have, look at these familiar products that you use every day. And, these are all great products, but the security that goes into these. If we just pick one, for example, YouTube is ingesting over 500 hours of video every minute. And as that happens, that video is scanned to make sure it's not harmful content. Is it copyrighted content? Is it malicious? All of those things. And that information is then indexed and distributed where it's available to be consumed at the scale of billions of hours a day. Gmail, you've probably seen, phishing attempts where you'll see notices that this may be a phishing attempt or this sender is untrusted. Search, you've seen safe search, where if we find a site to be malicious, we're flagging that. But all of these efforts and investments that we're making in security across all these products really is what is delivered to our customers in Google Cloud. So all of the technologies that power these applications are the same technologies that are available to our customers in Google Cloud. So really, it allows our customers to build products and services that are as secure as these services that we are delivering to billions of users. This slide here, I think, is obligatory, and it's really a lot of the myth busting. I think that the public perception for Google and security and privacy is largely based on our ads business. So a lot of people that are using our products think that, hey, you know everything about me, you're selling that data. And businesses, enterprises particularly, are coming to us and saying, I don't want to put my data in your cloud. What are you going to do with it? Are you going to sell that data? Are you going to use it to compete with me? But it's important to understand that on the consumer side, we are, as we mentioned, delivering a lot of value for a lot of people with zero cost in most cases. And if you can imagine, the bill to pay for that is incredible. So it requires a large amount of investment to make that all possible. And that's where the ad side is taking personal data, well, not personal data, but user data, anonymizing that and using that to target ads and selling, those ad spaces to advertisers. On the enterprise side, it is a paid product paid for by our customers. And with that said, we don't need to monetize it any other way. So all of our customers, their data is their data, and we don't have any access to that. We talked a little bit about the second point. We're not selling that data to third parties. We're not using it for advertising. Further, all data in Google Cloud is encrypted in transit and at rest by default. It is not something that is configurable. You cannot turn it on. So we don't have access to customer data. In some cases, in support situations, we may be granted access, and that is something called access transparency, where our customers have to approve access, and they actually get an audit log saying who accessed what data and why. And the only case that happens is when you need our help to fix something. As far as insider access goes, we are vetting all of our employees with security checks. We regularly undergo security trainings. And again, we're logging all of that data. Further, as far as government backdoor access, many people think that NSA or government entities have, some sort of backdoor access to our infrastructure. That is certainly not the case. To that point, we absolutely have to comply with local laws wherever we operate. So in cases where there is a crime or, some sort of investigation happening, we may be subpoenaed and may have to cooperate. But generally speaking, there is no open line where any government entity has access to our system. Finally, I can tell you this all day and it sounds great, but how do you know it's true? These practices are all regularly audited by international organizations, third-party vendors to ensure that we're compliant. So with that said, and again, we're going to move pretty quick. We're going to talk about what we're doing from a protection perspective to protect your data and infrastructure, what sort of controls are available, and then how we're helping you achieve your compliance goals. So one of the first things that we're doing to protect infrastructure, if you look at these icons here, you'll see purpose-built chips, purpose-built servers, purpose-built storage, purpose-built network, purpose-built yada yada. The point of that is that we design a lot of our equipment ourselves. So the purpose that you see on the screen, everything that we are designing has one and only one purpose, and that is to deliver Google services. So to that point, we've developed things like the Titan chip, which establishes a hardware root of trust that allows us to verify bootloaders and firmware that is on the equipment that we're running to ensure that nothing's been compromised and nothing will run that hasn't been signed and authorized to be run. To that point, from a server perspective, if Google were a server manufacturer, we would be one of the largest in the world, but we don't sell a single one. So we're building this equipment, network equipment, chips, really all to ensure that we aren't dependent on any third party or at risk due to a third party. I think a lot of you are probably familiar with Spectre and Meltdown, which we'll see a little bit later. But these vulnerabilities, unfortunately, when they were disclosed, which were actually disclosed by Google researchers in Project Zero, the world had to scramble, and oftentimes you're waiting for a fix from someone else. By controlling this end-to-end, it gives us the ability to react quickly and get ahead of these problems before our customers even see these. So zero trust largely was a concept developed at Google, but really what you see is a multi-layered approach to security. So everything within Google is a service, and every service call is mutually authenticated and goes through a number of different layers of security. And what that really means is that we are not relying on any one technology to secure a service or infrastructure. So we're not doing any sort of implicit security where, any resources that are in the same rack in the same data center are on the same VLAN and they can implicitly trust each other. Basically, there's, authentication, there's encryption, there's multiple services all working together. And the goal is that any one piece of those can fail and it won't leave the door open to vulnerabilities. That said, this is just a snapshot of our global private network. It's probably grown since I updated these slides. But really the reason I like to show this is that one of the things that we do really unique, and spoiler alert, a lot of this was largely due to the YouTube acquisition. We needed to get as close as possible to our users to deliver content as fast as possible and as performant as possible. So with that, we've invested over 20 years laying our own fiber under the sea across terrestrial locations. But really, we've built one of the world's largest global private networks, and that allows us to do some things very unique as far as security and performance goes. And this here I like to throw in, it's just kind of a fun slide, but really we are testing these to make sure they're shark proof. That is an actual video of a shark trying to eat through one of our fiber lines, and a picture of one of our ships that is actually laying subsea fiber cable. So I talked about the scale of the network, but with that said, one of the unique differentiators and from a security perspective, security features of the Google network is we are within typically 1 to 2 hops of something like 80 or 90% of users on the internet. And what that allows us to do is take in traffic and secure that traffic as close as possible to the users versus as close as possible to our facilities. And a lot of ISPs and a lot of other providers, what you'll see is the traffic between a user and a facility, a vendor facility, is routed over the public internet, which means there's potential availability issues. If one of those links is affected, there's sometimes not a whole lot that can be done, but you're depending on a third party to fix the issue. If it becomes compromised, it puts you at risk. Our goal is to ingest traffic and get it on our network as close to the user as fast as possible, which allows us to deliver great performance and great security because all of this is encrypted end to end as soon as it touches our network. I won't spend too much time on this. We talked about encryption by default, but it is not configurable. We also have the option for regulated workloads where customers can manage their own keys and bring their own keys for encryption for many of our services. Scale, we talked earlier a little bit about scale, but really the point being, because of the scale that we operate, we're in every vertical, we're in every geography, we have a very unique perspective of what is out there. So we're oftentimes seeing vulnerabilities before anyone else sees them, and that allows us to create products and solutions and respond to those. So really, we're seeing it at the mobile device level, Android, Chrome browsers. We're seeing it with websites that we're scanning and indexing, but it gives us a unique perspective to really get ahead of these threats and deliver more secure solutions. I won't spend too much time on this. I did mention Spectre and Meltdown before. Live migration, which I think is pretty standard in most of the industry now, but we've been doing it since day one. And really, when Spectre and Meltdown were disclosed by our researchers to the world, we didn't have a single ticket open because we had already patched all these systems and migrated workloads around them. So there was no disruption to users. But more importantly, this is our commitment to security at global scale. We believe that a safe internet is what's good for one is good for all. If you focus solely on securing your own systems, but somebody else is not securing their systems, then they put you at risk because they can become compromised and they can attack you. So point being here, these were very high profile vulnerabilities that we discovered, and we immediately shared all of this with the world because we wanted everybody to get up to speed and secure themselves. As far as controls, I'm just checking time here. I'm going to move pretty quick. This, I think, for most is pretty straightforward. Just understanding the differences between infrastructure as a service, platform, software as a service, where that shared responsibility lies. So how much of the security responsibility is on the vendor versus the customer. And it really depends on the services that you're consuming, whether it's VMs or whether it's a managed service or whether it's a SaaS service. This eye chart here, I really like to just put up really quick. And the goal is to kind of put all the cards on the table and show people what does a comprehensive security program really look like? Because oftentimes customers look at this and they say, oh, I didn't think about that. That's an area that I can improve on. And the point is that is teeing up for this slide, which kind of shows where we have solutions that fit into that. And again, this is not a sales pitch, so I'm not going to spend too much time. You'll get the decks afterward.
And one other thing that I think is useful about this, and this is tying in with this, just to emphasize the defense in depth strategy for everyone. All of you need to understand what GCP, and we're going to hear later on from AWS and Azure, what they're doing. You also need all these great third-party solution providers listed here, along with other companies who are speaking here today, such as ZPE or Synor. And then finally, what you do. And what each entity's responsibilities are will simply vary based on your infrastructure, your solutions, the tools you're using. You just need to be pretty clear in defining who does what to ensure that your architecture for your defense in depth shared security responsibility model doesn't have any openings or vulnerabilities. That's why you want to talk to all the people on this call.
Yeah, thank you, Ron. Yeah, and this one, really the point is just that you don't have to throw away what you've already done. I think this is probably standard, procedure nowadays. We work with a ton of different partners, so deployable solutions on our platform as well as implementation and service partners. But really, a lot of the solutions that you're using today can integrate with Google Cloud Solutions. So we can ingest from these systems and we can export to these systems. So you don't need to reinvent the wheel. From a compliance perspective, not going to spend a whole lot of time. This isn't comprehensive. This list, you can go to our security page and you can get reports based on verticals, based on geographies, what certifications we hold. In many cases, you can download the audit reports. Some of them are publicly available. Some you have to work with your sales team if you are a Google Cloud customer to acquire those. But really, the point that I like to make on this is one thing that I think is really unique about how we're approaching compliance is that what you see here applies to the entire GCP platform. We do not have separate platforms for regulated workloads or non-regulated workloads, where in many cases you may have an instance where, you know, I have this regulated workload, it goes in this tenant because that is the offering that meets these compliance requirements. And there is another tenant for my everyday workloads. Again, we believe security, what's good for one is good for all. So as we move forward and we try to meet the requirements of all these certifications, we are looking to implement it across the board. So I will say to that point, all of these certifications don't apply to every product. So BigQuery, compute engine, storage, you know, whatever the product may be, you have to know which certifications each holds. So not every product gets every certification at the same time. But the point being that there is only one environment and all of the certifications that we hold apply to that environment entirely. We don't have separate environments that have separate compliance requirements. So with that, the fun stuff, this is more of a public service announcement, but it's really a real world use case. And you may not know it, but you likely have a problem. So I would bet, if I were a betting man, I would bet that probably everybody who's listening to this call in an organization probably has this problem and they don't know what this problem is. The problem that I'm speaking of is Google being Google, we have different types of accounts. Our internal user management system is actually global in nature, and there are different namespaces. So there's the Gmail namespace, which is a consumer account with email attached. But there's also accounts, Google accounts that don't have email attached that are just consumer accounts, unmanaged accounts. And these are often used by employees where maybe they have a corporate issued Android phone, they need to access the Play Store, so they need a Google account. And they can sign up with their company domain for a free Google account and use that to access all of our services. So typically what we find is this is the case across almost every customer. You probably have somebody in your marketing team that's using Google Analytics, most likely as a unmanaged consumer account. Maybe you have a YouTube channel, a mobile app. All of these are typically done by unmanaged accounts. And we also have the concept of managed accounts. So with that said, some people say, well, so what? It's always been that way. This has been happening and you're telling me about it now, but it was happening yesterday. I didn't think it was a problem yesterday. Why is it a problem now? So there's many risks, and I see these every day. That's the real world use case. I've had examples where a customer had an unmanaged account that was associated with their domain, was using GCP for a project. It was paid for by the company's billing account, and the employee had left the company. The project became compromised, set up crypto mining, and racked up millions of dollars in charges overnight. And the customer came to us and said, hey, what happened? Like, how did this happen? And unfortunately, the terms of use for these consumer users say that we have an obligation to protect their privacy, their security, and their data. So that account is actually the sole ownership of whoever owns that account. So there really isn't a whole lot they could do. In this case, the billing account was managed by the customer, so they could unlink the project that went rogue from that billing account and stop the bleeding. But there is nothing they could do to take ownership of that project or to secure it because it belonged to an unmanaged user. So these risks, data exfiltration, anyone could take the data if they're using Google Drive for work. That data technically belongs to them, even though they're using your domain. It is their data. Impersonation. If these people leave the company, they verified their email to sign up for the account, and once they've done that, their account name stays the same. So if they're sharing files on Drive with your company domain, somebody receiving that is likely to trust that they're affiliated with your organization when they may in fact not be. We talked about financial impact and, more importantly, lack of controls and policy enforcement. You can't enforce how people are interacting with these services, where they're doing it from, password strength, rotation, all that. And that in turn all leads to compliance. If your employees are using these services in an unmanaged fashion and you have compliance requirements, they may be in violation of that and you have no mechanism to enforce that. So the good news is there is a solution, and I am very passionate about this topic. So again, feel free to reach out to me after. There is a solution that we have, and it's free. Unfortunately, most people outside of cloud don't know about it because it is a prerequisite to using Google Cloud. We have to have managed identity. but anyone can use it, whether you're using Google Cloud or not. And it is a free service for an unlimited amount of users. So what is the solution? It's a product called Google Cloud Identity. It's our identity as a service platform, which really allows you to create, just as your users are signing up with Google for an unmanaged Google account, you can create a managed Google account for them. Additionally, you can set up SSO federation to your identity provider, be it Azure AD, Okta, whatever it may be. You can then enforce MFA at a organization-wide level, and you can scope that to different groups. You can further, what's very interesting to a lot of customers is you can then manage access to Google services. So if you don't want your employees using Drive, for example, you can block Drive, and you can restrict it that these sets of users can use Drive, these sets of users can use GCP, these sets of users can get to ads, whatever. But once you have the identities managed, you can put policies on them, you can audit them, and you can enforce those policies. We talked about user authentication options. So we have the ability to authenticate with our platform alone. So think local password, as well as single sign-on. And then further, we can also act as an IDP to third-party services and give you that same experience where you go to access, Facebook or another service, and it says, do you want to sign in with your Google account? You can then do that with your managed identities. So you can federate to your identity provider, and then any third-party service that supports Google authentication, you can leverage your own directory. Finally, once you have verified your domain and set up cloud identity, you as the domain owner get visibility into what unmanaged accounts exist already. So you will get a report showing you, here is a list, and in many cases, customers say, I don't think I have that many. They find thousands. It's almost always the case. You have people most likely in your organizations with Google accounts, with your domain, and we have a report that will show you what all of those accounts are. Again, as I mentioned, these accounts are owned by the individuals that created them. So you can't forcibly take ownership of those accounts and make them managed. However, we have a transfer tool which allows you to send an invite. You can tell your users, hey, here's what's going on. Here's what it means to you. If they accept it, all of their data comes with them and their account becomes managed, and you take over, authentication, policy, lifecycle management, whatever it may be. So this is an exercise. It definitely takes time. The other benefit of this is, as the domain owner, if you verified your domain, you can actually evict any of those users. If you determine these are ex-employees and they have your domain and their email address, you can create a managed identity with the same name as that unmanaged identity, which forces a rename. It gives them a temporary user ID. And the next time they try to log into any Google authentication service, it will say, the domain owner has claimed this identity, you have to choose a new name. And we typically suggest pick a Gmail for those users, but they can really pick any other name that they want as long as it's not in use. So really, that is how you solve the problem and how you prevent it from happening in the future. Once you've got your domain verified and you have, maybe user provisioning set up to sync with your IDP, at that point, you provision your entire directory. So every one of your employees has a managed Google account. Any that weren't transferred in and existed previously are evicted. And nobody moving forward can create one, because if they try to create an unmanaged account, either you've already created a managed account for them and that identity exists, so it will fail, or they try to pick something that is invalid and they won't be able to verify the account because it uses email verification. So if all of those verified emails in your directory are pulled in, you will never have that problem in the future. So I've said a lot. I wanted to rush through that. I think I actually did better than I thought on time.